Support provided by Walters, Papillon, Thomas Cullins, LLC, specializing in business litigation and personal injury cases for over 40 years.
I bring all of you greetings from the state capitol, located in our Baton Rouge, where it apparently now takes 7 special sessions to pass a comprehensive budget plan. In fact, State Representative Robert Johnson now refers to himself as a special session specialist. Baton Rouge, the home of the fiscal cliff, the gang of no, the honor code, the lower chamber, the upper chamber, things that go bump in the night, and at least one barroom fistfight between legislators that we know of. In fact, again, House Natural Resources Chairman Stuart Bishop said of that altercation, the next time it will be dueling guns. So at least folks are getting along in Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge, where the body of a dead governor rests in the lawn of a Capitol that is covered in scaffolding. The Capitol, nothing ever dies, nothing really works, everything is under construction, and no one knows why. So I bring you greetings from the Capitol, located in our Baton Rouge. French for red stick, a nod to the blood-soaked rods that Native Americans used to mark territory, that the legislature, with all of its turf wars, would call this place home as appropriate. But I bring more than just greetings from the Capitol. I also bring words and sentences, the words of elected officials, lobbyists, cabinet secretaries, and others from the Capitol class. They said it a lot, and this is what they said. This is Senator J.P. Morrell describing Louisiana. It's hard to compare apple to apple here when our state is a banana. This is Representative Thomas Carmody speaking to the House about the House on the floor. I think we're all smart people in here, for the most part. This is Senator Norby Chabert explaining what his constituents would do with that extra pocket cash from the Earned Income Tax Credit. They're going to spend it down at the Winn-Dixie. This is Representative Barry Ivey with a very, very important geography lesson. I realize why Louisiana is shaped like a boot, because we're a kick-the-can state. Finance Chairman Eric LaFleur on government relations. Lobbying is no different than getting your friends in 4th grade to court the girl you want to talk to on the playground. Finally, the final word from Senator Francis Thompson, the second longest serving legislator at the Capitol, offering his interpretation of fiscal policy. Using the analogy between the budget and a skinny pig, both of them are ugly. So all of these quotes were collected as part of what we call They Said It. It's the way that we end every issue of La Politics Weekly, which this year is celebrating its 25th anniversary. The hub for all of our work, as you heard, is lapolitics.com. If it's easier for you, that's lapolitics.com. We come at things a little differently at La Politics. We don't cover breaking news. We don't cover beat news. We don't cover traditional news, for that matter. All we cover is Louisiana politics and nothing else. Who's angling for what seat, how much money is being spent on advertising, where the votes are for big bills, why certain bills failed, why certain bills passed. We also come at it from a middle swim lane. We don't come at it from a perspective on the right. We don't come at it from the left. If that's what you're looking for, you're not going to find it at lapolitics.com. What we do amounts to a trade publication. We are a trade publication for elected officials, donors, lobbyists, government relations teams, journalists, people who spend money on or make money from Louisiana politics. So if you're deranged enough to be in one of those categories, do yourself a favor and check out lapolitics.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at lapoliticsnow. So what are we working on? On the La Politics Report podcast, we are looking at sharks, sharps, shapers, and shills. In case you don't know, the recent regular session was also a gaming session. riverboats, casinos, racetracks, truck stops, video gaming, sports betting, internet gaming companies. They were all at the table for the regular session. And that's why our guest this week and next week is going to be Senator Ronnie Johns, who authored the legislation that may eventually move those riverboats from the water onto land. And next week is Alton Ashey. He is the Capitol's leading lobbyist on video poker. And then this is his first full-length sit-down interview. On Capital Gains, which is our kind of a Sunday morning political talk show, it's a video that we post online. We just recorded an episode with the man known as the Cajun John Wayne, Congressman Clay Higgins. In this episode of Capital Gains, which you can find online right now, Congressman Higgins told me that he had been in thousands of fights and read thousands of books. He told me that he invented a form of kung fu that draws energy from the earth using circles and shapes. We recorded it all from his front porch in Port Barre, drinking beer with his 5 dogs, an assault rifle by the door frame, and 2 Glocks within reach. It was quite an experience, and I encourage y'all to check that out. The next episode of Capital Gains is going to feature Representative Gary Carter and Senator Troy Carter. It's going to be filmed in New Orleans. They are the only nephew-uncle duo in the Louisiana legislature, but they're also members of the Black Caucus. And we're going to have a mini documentary as part of that episode that kind of recounts the history of the Black Caucus. And it's an opportune time to do so, because I think if you're looking at this year's legislative sessions, if you're trying to pick winners and losers, good luck, because, I mean, nobody wins. But the Black Caucus politically seems to have walked away a winner. Politically, they have found a way to vote and operate independently of not only the governor, but also the Democratic Party as a whole. They've influenced recent policy at the Capitol as much as, if not more so, than any other Capitol faction. In this recently adjourned special session that barely happened, the Black Caucus walked away with enhanced funding for Southern and Grambling, but they also walked away with the passage of an increase in the earned income tax credit. And that therein resides one of the more interesting questions about this next session that starts on Monday. Democrats said that they would be open to voting in favor of a sales tax increase only if the legislature first passed the earned income tax credit. So do caucus members now come to the table for this new session and say, look, EITC passed, what can we do to help pass a sales tax bill? Or do they come to the table and say, thanks for the gimme, it's time to restart negotiations? That's going to be an important question, and negotiations have already started in earnest. So yesterday we published Tuesday Tracker. That is our free publication. It's a GPS for Louisiana politics. It's absolutely free. You can sign up for it right now at lapolitics.com. But this was our lead headline from yesterday morning. Lead headline in the Tuesday Tracker. Peace talks begin at Capitol. It may sound dramatic, especially if you haven't lived through the last 3 regular sessions and 6 special sessions. But in some way, they are peace talks. We had one session this term end with the Senate President in tears. We had a couple conclude without budgets passed. And we had at least one that I'm not even convinced actually happened. But meetings did begin on Monday, negotiations for the upcoming session, 1 week before the special session is to begin. That's notable. That is something that has been lacking from recent sessions, is an early dialogue. And it seems like legislative leaders are trying to get ahead of the curve. So while this isn't North Korea and the United States, in a way it is peace talks between the House and Senate. I think what everyone wants is a compromise, but I think what the body needs more than anything else is a healthy dose of goodwill. So what else was in the tracker? We offered up a primer on the special session if you need to catch up. It is June 18th through the 27th. Sales taxes mostly are on the menu. As for what's on the table, business and industry has convinced themselves that it is them. There are 2 big tax breaks in the state sales tax structure for business and industry. There's one for business utilities and one for manufacturing machinery and equipment. There seems to be a little more give and take on the business utility side. We'll have to see. I don't imagine that MM&E is going to come back up in any real way. But what started to happen at the end of this most recent session is that legislators started looking elsewhere in the sales tax structure to grab a few extra dollars from business and industry, broadening the base, broadening services. Some of these ideas never made it into the bills that were moving. Some did, but neither passed, so it's neither here nor there. The Tuesday Tracker, we also take a look back at history. That's something we do every single week. And this week we offered up a retrospective of Louisiana's only African-American governor. 92 years before the passage of the Civil Rights Act, Pinckney Benton Stewart Pinchback was governor of Louisiana. But I don't think a lot of folks know his backstory, how he got to the governor's office, what he did in the governor's office, and that story's in the Tracker, plus a Q&A with former Congressman Billy Tozan. So in next week's episode of the La Politics Lowdown, that's our weekly video series, we look at different issues in politics and try to make it easy to digest. We also try to humanize the personalities that are in Louisiana politics. But we're going to be asking a very simple question or two or three. What would you do for $16,800 a year? Would you take on a pressure-filled full-time job for $16,800 a year? That is the annual pay of state legislators. Now, that doesn't include per diems. It doesn't include mileage reimbursements. It doesn't include other pockets of taxable and non-taxable revenue. But it's not that impressive either. The current legislature has literally spent more consecutive days in session at the Capitol this term than any other legislature since the legislature was created in 1812. And they're still being paid a wage that was established 38 years ago. And here's the trick with it, is if the legislative salary is to change, legislators have to do it. No one wants to vote for their own pay increase and go face re-election. The legislature had a deal in 2008 to bring their pay up to $37,500 annually, but the governor at the time, Bobby Jindal, crawfished on the deal. It got sideways. And that was really the last bite of the apple. But next week's Lowdown video series will explain why the national average is $35,500, a forward cry from $16,800. Hopefully you'll take a listen to it and make your own decision. That brings us to La Politics Weekly. It's the holy grail of our business model, the Bible of political tip sheets, the oldest subscription-based service for insider political information in Louisiana. Our lead story tomorrow is going to be a rundown of all of the legislators who have carried lead tax bills this term. What's most striking about that is that every year, every session, it tends to be a different personality. From that side of the GOP House, from the side in the administration, there's no consistency in these bill authors or floor leaders, save one person perhaps, Representative Katrina Jackson. But what I suspect that these interviews will show, and they're starting to show us already, is just how divided the legislature is, how fractured these issues are, particularly in the House. And I think it's also going to show how personality politics have really come into play this term. It matters more than ever who is carrying a bill. You're not going to see Republicans vote for a tax increase authored by a Democrat, but you will see Republicans vote for a tax increase authored by a Republican. Overall, I think it speaks to a policy system where legislators and others in the capital class are throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. And I'm here to tell you that more than halfway through this term, as of right now, very little is sticking to the wall. We'll also have another story about the coming changes in the House of Representatives. And I think it's important to take a look at that because there's been a lot of attention on the Senate and the changes that the Senate's going to go through beginning in 2020. The reason being is that the House is already undergoing a sea change politically. The most significant event of this term so far, and I would argue that it will remain one of the more important, if not the most important, was the election of Taylor Barra as Speaker of the House. It was the first time in modern history that the governor's choice for Speaker did not get in there. To put it plainly, the governor no longer has control of the House, no longer has control over committee assignments, and this transition process has proven to be pretty messy. The Senate, meanwhile, has historically been a backstop for sitting governors. That remains true, but the Senate is starting to undergo some changes now that many were predicting would happen next term. And they're little glimpses into things to come. For the very first time, the Republican delegation in the Senate created bylaws and elected new officers. I know it probably doesn't sound like a big deal to everyone in this room, but the Senate is not a body that puts rules on paper. They're very much a body guided by tradition. As we discussed, the Black Caucus is acting more independently, and the center of the body in the Senate is starting to track slightly right, and I think it's going to continue to do that as we get closer to re-election. That was evidenced by this year's votes on equal pay and minimum wage, two issues that are very important to the governor that he failed to even get out of the Senate this year. So the governor has not lost the Senate. I want to be clear about that. He has not lost the Senate, but the governor does face more challenges in the upper chamber today than he did when he took office. So outside of the politics, when I'm not sleeping and not spending time with my family, I'm working on my second book that comes out in the winter. It's an account of the 1973-74 Constitutional Convention, which of course led to our current Constitution. What jumped off the page to me first about that convention that gave us our Constitution were the names. I challenge you to go look at the list of names from the 73-74 convention and come back and tell me that it's not arguably one of the greatest generations of politicos gathered for one purpose under one roof. The delegates went on to become governor, secretary of state, insurance commissioner, members of Congress, members of the legislature, two speakers of the House, one Senate president, a handful of federal judges, some appellate court judges, major donors who rub elbows with presidents. Names like Bubba Henry, John Alario, Buddy Roemer, Jim Brown, Judge Duvall, Judge Dennis, Boise Bollinger, Pat Juneau, Woody Jenkins, Calvin Fayard, just to name a few. This group overcame great odds to give us the document that we call our guiding charter today. They were running low on cash at one point. They were running out of time. There's a general sense of distrust on the floor, and the floor itself had to be relocated 3 times. In fact, at one point, the convention floor was inside the White House Inn, which was a hotel behind the state capitol. And every Wednesday, everybody had to pitch in and break the floor down and pick it up because those were the nights they had professional wrestling at the White House Inn. But it's a snapshot in time that's fascinating to me because what you have is it marks a time where Louisiana's professional politicians, for the first time, are starting to turn away from the Huey Long era, and they're thirsty. They're thirsty for accountability, and they're thirsty for ethics. And you got to remember that this is the time where lobbyists were kicked off the House floor. Our Constitutional Convention was 45 years ago. Shortly before that, they finally kicked lobbyists off the floor. Lobbyists were allowed to go on the House floor, sit in the legislature seat, vote their machine, do whatever they wanted to. It happened at a time when Nixon was trying to overcome Watergate. Trust in government was at an all-time low. There was the sexual revolution. There were racial progress, and it's just, to me, it's just a fascinating snapshot. Now, of course, there's an ongoing conversation about another constitutional convention. State Representative Franklin Foyle is in attendance in the back of the room. He is one of the perennial authors of the convention. He was all about the convention before the convention was cool. And the convention started to trend as an issue because Lane Grigsby, a well-known donor, businessman from Baton Rouge, put together a group, the Constitutional Coalition 2020, business groups, chambers, to push the issue. I think that ended up dividing the final vote on the Constitutional Convention this year. I think it's notable that you did not have a single African-American lawmaker vote in favor of the Constitutional Convention legislation. If this issue is going to move forward, if this is going to continue to be an issue, that's something that the architects and the boosters need to get on pretty soon and figure out what's going on. But there are learning lessons from '73 to apply to a future convention, should there be one. starting with the election of delegates. And once the legislature creates a framework and it's enacted, you then have to seat your delegates. And there's two basic ways you can do it. You can appoint delegates, or you can elect delegates. In 1973, they did a little bit of both. They elected them from House districts. Part of the conversation this year was electing delegates from House districts again, and it puts state representatives in this really kind of weird place where they have to make a decision. Do I run in my own House seat and represent my constituents like I'm doing now, or do I run and lose? And if I lose, what happens? And there are a number of stories that are in the book, that are going to be in the book that comes out this winter, where unknown entities ran for delegate against sitting legislators, beat them, served as delegates, and then came back and ran in the next election cycle and beat them for the House seat as well. Another big difference between 73 and if we should have a convention is, I get the sense from the delegates who served 45 years ago that there's a free flow exchange of ideas. Everyone knows that politics are toxic and that people get emotional and passionate, and maybe more so than ever. But I think today's delegates would recognize that just an idea, not a resolution or an article or something that's sent to voters for approval, but just the idea can stir up their base, can upset their constituents. And plus, any convention that is coming is going to be, I'm sure, streamed live 24/7. As long as they're meeting, we'll be able to watch it online. There are transcripts from 1973, 74, but there wasn't that kind of eye in the sky. A constitutional convention needs wind beneath its wings, and in 73, that wind was Edwin Edwards. He ran for governor for the first time in 1971. There's a lot of back and forth and disagreement over why the governor chose this as a central plank in his platform, but I believe we've nailed down the answer, and that will be in the book. But you don't have that figurehead right now. Governor John Bel Edwards is not entirely opposed to the idea of another constitutional convention, but he thinks that Louisiana should take its time, that it should be studied for a couple of years, and we should build up to it. Which brings us to something else I think the state needs if there will be a convention, which I think more failure. Before the 73 convention, there were a couple dozen amendments sent to the ballot, and voters rejected every single one. And then, of course, you also have the challenge of selling it to the people once we get there. So let's recap real quick about where we've been and where we're going. On the legislative front, we've been in 3 regular sessions, 6 special sessions. Louisiana still has a temporary tax on the books, and there is a shortfall of about $648 million that lawmakers are trying to tackle. It's all going to come down to the sales tax. Historically, when the state needs money in a quick and dirty way, when they need money like tomorrow, they rely on the sales tax. They fall back on the sales tax. I don't think this year is going to be an exception, and based on this latest call, it's kind of what lawmakers are stuck with. I think if there is a temporary nature to anything that is passed through the special session, that lawmakers will make it stretch into next term so they don't have to deal with this before re-election next year. We do have elections this fall, congressional districts, some school boards. The 2 biggest races to kind of watch is in the 3rd congressional district, Congressman Clay Higgins. His numbers are extremely strong. His fundraising is strong. Whereas most people have a finance committee, Clay Higgins has the Higgins Posse. These are folks who, a lot of these folks spent money against him 2 years ago, and now they're part of his posse. But the fact that Clay Higgins is in that race just makes it one to watch. The other one to watch is Congressman Ralph Abraham. He is the congressman from northeast Louisiana, up Monroe Way, and I don't even know if he's going to have opposition. If he does have opposition, he'll probably win re-election based on historic trends. But he is also thinking about running for governor in 2019. So I want to see, I'm sure his team hopes someone runs so they can spend some money, because I want to see if Ralph Abraham's going to spend money on commercials like Down in Houma, because try to get his name recognition up heading into next year. The big races are next year, 2019. The legislature, we talked a little bit about that. Bessie, but the top of the ballot, the one thing everybody cares about is the governor's race. John Bel Edwards is up for re-election. Not long ago, some people called him a long shot. Now he's a big shot because he's a governor. Some folks think he's a no shot, but he's still kind of a big shot, so I'll give him some kind of shot to make it into the runoff. But there's a large field. We should start hearing more names here soon. Steve Scalise is the latest to say he is not going to run. We have a couple minutes left. I can take a question or two if anyone has one. Yes, ma'am.
What is your take on Senator Kennedy's suggestion that the governor resign?
I think Senator Kennedy better be careful what he wishes for. The question was, what do I think about Senator Kennedy saying that John Bel Edwards should resign and Billy Nungesser become acting governor? And my answer is, I think he better be careful what he wishes for. It's the same kind of theatrics we see from John Kennedy all the time. Yes, sir.
What about tops?
That's a good question. He asked, what about tops? We were just talking about how the budget was passed with how it's not contingent upon additional revenue coming in, but it would distribute that whatever revenue is created. Thank you all.
Support provided by Walters, Papillon, Thomas Cullens, LLC, specializing in business litigation and personal injury cases for over 40 years.